all over in Illinois and all over this country, the working people of this nation need a raise. And what we are saying as loudly and clearly as we can is that if you work 40 or 50 hours a week, you should not be living in poverty.
I am here with Deia Schlosberg and Conrad Shaw. They are they're filmmakers who are working on an exciting new project that involves the idea of universal basic income. We're here at the People's Summit in Chicago, and of course the issue of economic justice is very high on the agenda. Welcome to the program, Deia and Conrad.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So first, before we get into the project that you're working on, a lot of people may never have heard of this idea of universal basic income. Explain it. I mean, it's what it sounds like, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The idea is nobody can fall below a certain level, that everybody deserves life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and money is essentially a tool to be able to survive and get those things. And UBI is generally defined as $1,000 a month is a common number thrown out there in a lot of models, and that means that if everybody gets that, no one falls below the poverty line.
And that's not the same as a minimum wage. This is something that one might get in the same way that one gets a Social Security check if you're above your, if you're at the age where you collect one, right?
Yeah, so the basic way to think about it is like a Social Security program expanded to everyone. And it's not means tested like welfare. It's not based on whether you're retired. It's just everyone gets, say, that $1,000 a month to make sure that no one's on the street, everyone can pay for basic housing and needs, and people can stop thinking about what do I need to take for myself to survive in this world, and more about, okay, well, I know I can always live in dignity in a house with food. How do I want to contribute?
So has this program or this type of a program ever been implemented anywhere, or does this exist in the realm of theory so far?
There have been trials all over the world. There was a really successful trial in Canada in the 70s. There are currently trials in Finland, in India, in Kenya.
Oakland, Ontario.
So I understand that you are also going to start some sort of a trial and basically see what would happen in the United States if you basically gave some number of people a minimal amount of money per month for no reason. They don't have to work for it or anything.
Yeah, absolutely. We think everybody is entitled to basic human rights. And that's what our trial is going to be. We're picking several people from all over the country, 15 to 20, giving them a basic income of $1,000 a month. And our documentary is going to be following them and watching how their lives change and how their decisions follow.
So you're making a documentary about how the whole thing plays out. It's not just a sort of sociological study. I mean, it is, but on film?
Right. Yeah, so right now the movement is very much in the academic space, and a lot of people talk about the economic policy, or if they do get into the human behavior, it's all very speculative and theory. But what we foresee happening as this becomes more and more in the public space is a reaction we see a lot, which is people say, well, I don't want to pay for someone else to get by without working. I don't want to subsidize laziness. I'm afraid other people will play video games, do drugs. The trials before have shown that this is largely misconception about human nature. It's sort of bred into us by the sort of capitalism we live in, where you have to work to even survive, right? So what we want to show is what people actually do from all walks of life when you give them money. We want to show that, hopefully to confirm what we believe. We'll show what actually happens, but to confirm what we believe, which is that given a basic floor of economic security, people will use the money wisely, they will plan their lives more effectively, and they'll become more powerful contributors to society.
In previous experiments, is that what was found?
Yeah, absolutely. The only people who worked less were new parents and high school students who were able to finish school instead of taking a job to survive.
So those are people who really shouldn't be working anyway.
Exactly, but nobody else decreased their level of employment or
The thing a lot of people miss is they think if you give people money, they'll stop working, right? But what we do now with our welfare system is we give people conditional money. So some people call it universal basic income, some people call it unconditional basic income, but that's a very important part of it, that there is no means testing. You don't have to show that you're poor enough to get it. So what that means is there is no bureaucratic process to prove that you deserve it. So one, you never have to go through that hassle in the first place, and two, when you take work, you don't lose it. There is no disincentive to work. Right now, under welfare and unemployment, it's actually often the wise thing to do not to work because it can hurt you. If you lose your job in a week, you'll be back off benefits and you'll be poorer than you were before. But if it's something guaranteed to everyone, it's not just sort of targeted help for the poor. It's a stable floor for everyone. Anyone could lose their job. Anyone could live 20 years longer than they expected to. You know, everyone needs just to know somewhere deep inside that they're gonna be fine. They're gonna live a life of dignity, and they can plan more important things about what they want to contribute.
Now, $1,000 a month isn't even that much money. It's $12,000 a year. You might barely, if you live in Southern California, where I do, you might not even be able to make rent on $1,000 a month. So, is it meant to be something that, you know, that small? Is it meant, the idea of universal basic income, is it meant to be something that's really a minimal amount of money, or is it meant to be something that one can live on without having to work if one chose not to?
I think that it's basically a floor. So if something happens and you aren't able to, you won't starve and you won't end up on the street. There are ways to live and have a roof over your head for $1,000 a month.
Yeah, you might have to have roommates. You know, it's not universal luxury income; it's universal basic income. So, you know, you live in a cheap situation and feed yourself while you invest in a business you're starting, or while you pursue art, or while you go back to school. You can do it. We lived in New York City. I've lived in New York City for 10 years, on about that much, because I was pursuing art and acting. And
New York City for $1,000 a month, amazing.
It's not easy, and I've had a lot of roommates, but. The idea is, maybe it could be more someday, but $1,000 a month would be enough. That's the national poverty line, and it's that for a reason. It would be enough for anyone anywhere to live. Now, if it were actually implemented someday, I imagine it would be much like a minimum wage, where $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year would be like a national level, and if you're paying extra taxes for an expensive place to live, you get a local bump in your basic income as well, like in New York or San Francisco. It would be a little higher to account for that higher cost of living.
Maybe tack it to inflation or whatever.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So tell me more about the project now. So you said you would be rolling this out as a pilot program and then filming what happens to people, filming the evolution of people's lives as they get this money. How are you going to pick the people who get it, and where are they going to be distributed? You know, how far along are you in this process?
Yeah, we're pretty early on. We're in the fundraising part of the process. We're fundraising for the pilot program. The people we're selecting are people that will tell the story the best, because there are plenty of rigorous scientific studies going on.
So this isn't intended to necessarily be rigorously scientific.
No, it's definitely not. It's to
anecdotal evidence.
Yeah, to put people's faces to this concept and to tell people's real stories, and get the public more invested in the issue by, appealing to emotion and humanity. But the people we're selecting will be from all over the country, all different walks of life. We want to get a real cross-section of the U.S.
And that's one thing that makes us different than the other pilots, is they're all intended to be very scientifically rigorous, while they're going to come out with some very nice academic papers and arguments. Our goal is to sell it to the people. So they're also doing randomized selection for their candidates. We're going to be basically casting to decide what is going to tell the best story. So we want people from all walks of life. We want a farmer, a displaced manufacturing worker, a coal worker. We want teacher. We want someone in the upper middle class. You know, we want to see generally what do people do when they have extra coming in, whether it's getting out of a really bad spot or saving up for something more.
What are the kinds of things you think people would spend money on? And I think when we have these conversations, it also starts getting people thinking about what would they do with an extra $1,000 in their lives. Maybe it's the difference between, sending pursuing your dream and actually going to school or something, because these days it's hard to afford to go to school.
Absolutely. We've actually, in the past couple of weeks, have had 11,000 submissions come in.
Oh, so people have submitted themselves to...
They've submitted themselves. We weren't necessarily asking for submissions, but a couple articles came out framing it that way, so we embraced it, and we're reading through them, and it's pretty amazing. And for the vast majority, people just want to live their lives and contribute. So many people just say it would make ends meet. They wouldn't have to work 3 jobs. They would only have to work 2. They could go back to school. They could support their kid. Like, it's very, very basic.
Or they could pursue entrepreneurialism, or they could pursue their art, or they can get out of their debt.
They could buy a car just to be able to get to work. A lot of people lack transportation, and it's just
We've had, it's overwhelming reading these responses. Some are heartbreaking, some are inspiring. But the point is, we live in this country where a lot of the reaction is, I'm worried about what other people would do with this money. And people generally put themselves in the category of, well, I know what I would do. Everyone has a really good answer for what they would do that's beneficial to them, smart, beneficial to the economy, but then they're worried that half of the rest of the country is not going to. 99% of people are going to do something great with it, and they're worried about the rest of the country doing it.
And this is the standard conservative mindset, unfortunately, to see any kind of government-based subsidy, which of course comes from our tax dollars to begin with, as a, quote, handout, as something that will disincentivize people from working and undermine productivity. And there's sadly a sort of mean-spiritedness that comes out, and you hear stories of fraud being overblown. Is the idea of a universal basic income, is the challenge of having it adopted going to mean overcoming the challenge of suspicion and the sort of capitalist mentality that we take for granted in this country?
Definitely partly, but I think another way to go about it is to reframe it. Like, the wealthy already have a basic income, essentially. They make most of their money on unearned income. They were either born or had the fortune of coming upon money that makes money for them. And what the idea of basic income is, it acknowledges that nobody is where they are because of their own hard work. A lot of people had a lot more access to the communal resources than other people, and it's giving everybody some little bit of what they deserve.
Well, and most of the productivity we have today is directly a result of the technology from yesterday we lean on. It's all inherited from our ancestors. We all should own the land, the technology, the resources. Some people are able to shrewdly take more of it, but we should all have communal wealth. And that's sort of how you can turn it around and reframe it to say that it's not a handout.
When you said communal wealth, you know that a bunch of folks are going to basically say, you're a commie.
Yeah, well,
I get that label all the time every time I talk about economic justice.
It's not. It's more like, I like to think of it more as a capitalistic system of public ownership. We're all shareholders in this country. We all contribute in our own ways. All of our ancestors have contributed. So we should all have a dividend from the country. It's not dividing all the money up equally, no matter how much you do. It's saying everyone's got a share in the company that is this country, that comes from the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth isn't all the money we make. The Commonwealth is the land. The Commonwealth is the system, the structure of taxes and laws. These are all things that we should get part of the benefit from, because no one alive today created that system, and the people who take the most from it are taking more than their share from it.
And I would argue that the people whose ancestors contributed the most to that national wealth are, on the whole, receiving the least of benefit.
African Americans, Native Americans.
Absolutely.
Immigrant workers.
Yep.
But the other thing is to see it as what we need to get across is it's very much unlike welfare. It's not a handout. It's not assistance. It's for everyone.
One of the things that I think of when I hear you talk about that is during the George W. Bush era, he made much of tax cuts for everybody. And there was a point in time where people got some extra returns on their taxes that ended up serving as an economic stimulus. I remember if people got checks, right? It was your money, the government returned some taxes. And of course, what that does is it's not always a progressive thing when that happens, but it did have the impact of stimulating the economy because most people spent that money on stuff they need. And I'm wondering if it were to be cast in that way as an economic stimulus.
That's definitely one of the big arguments for it. I mean, the ending poverty is a huge one, but also there's the benefit to the economy. I think we can pretty much close the book on trickle-down economics on that working. When you have money, for economy to thrive, it needs to move, it needs to flow. And when you have money flowing up into the big bank accounts, it just sits there. It doesn't move. The middle class is shrinking. Money's not flowing. When you give money to people who need it, the net effect of a basic income is to have more money going to the people that need it and to the middle classes and the upper middle classes, then those people spend it on what they need. That's money straight back into the economy. That's money that is not just accruing and extracting more from our economy. It's giving straight back into it and putting people in a better situation in their lives. So if you're a local business, you all of a sudden have a whole new demographic of people that can come. Like when they raised the minimum wage in Seattle, they were worried that restaurants would have to fire all these people, but they had to hire more because all of a sudden they had a new whole demographic of people that could eat at the restaurants, waiters and people that work at restaurants. This creates a world where everyone can step to the plate and have a little bit of economic power.
What's the difference between pushing for a universal basic income versus pushing for a higher federal minimum wage?
Well, I mean, just to start, a minimum wage has one big assumption, which is that you have a job. Well, we're coming into a time when one of the latest estimates was that we were going to lose 20% of our jobs in the next, 50% of our jobs in the next 20 years due to automation. In the next 5 to 10 years, 7 million truck drivers and Uber drivers and bus drivers and people are going to lose their jobs, and you can't just assume that you're going to be able to retrain them all or new jobs will be created. Automation is coming to a turning point where it's getting better at us, not just at simple tasks, but also at general tasks, at thinking and analyzing.
You argue we need both a universal basic income and a higher federal minimum wage?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for people who are working, I definitely think that you should be able to live off of that, but they're certainly not mutually exclusive.
But, I mean, when you have a basic income, if you think about it, it brings more accountability to both the employer and the employee so that it strengthens the fight for minimum wage and also makes it less of the pressure on the minimum wage to take care of it. So if you think about it, if someone wants to pay you $8 an hour to clean toilets, which is not what it's worth, but before a basic income, you might have to take that because you don't know how you're going to pay your rent. After a basic income, you can say, no, I'm going to hold out for something else because I'm going to live without it. So someone will have to pay you.
More economic freedom to even get a better job.
People talk about it as not only is it the permanent seed fund for people to pursue their dreams, it's a permanent strike fund to get out of bad, abusive situations, whether it's your employer or it's great for women's empowerment. You can get out of financial abuse from a relationship you don't want to be in. People can take the steps they need in their life to get themselves in better situations.
So that economic freedom can also enable them to put upward pressure on wages, in fact.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about how far along your project is and what you need right now. Where can people, I understand you have a trailer online. Where can people find out more?
Sure. Our website is bootstrapsfilm.com, and we are also running a pilot project that through an organization called Hand Up to provide the funding for our characters.
So the name of the film is Bootstraps?
Bootstraps. Because the basic idea is, if we're going to have this idea in this country that we want people to lift themselves up by their bootstraps, the least we can do is provide the boots and a solid floor to stand on.
one of the challenges that progressives have had, that Democrats as a whole have had, is coming up with an economic agenda that works for everyone. We are pitted, the pitting is between business interests in the party and people really hurting on the front lines of the impact of a lot of the economic change. What's interesting about you is that some of the things that you've done and championed are a bridge for that. So I'm wondering, first of all, as you represent the wealthiest district in the world, probably the wealthiest county in the world, what is your inspiration to care about economic justice? Because you don't have to. You could be focused on a series of wealthy interests in your district and probably get reelected just with money from them. And secondly, what are the 2 or 3 progressive policies that you believe would move the needle the most in terms of an economy that works for everybody?
I appreciate it. Well, you know, you're right. I represent a district with Apple, Google, Intel, Yahoo, a presence of Facebook, Twitter. But even my district has a lot of people who've been left behind. My district has working families who can't afford $3,000 rent because that's what the rent is in Sunnyvale. It has people whose wages have stagnated. I think the biggest challenge for our country, for America being one nation, is this divide that the transition from an industrial to a digital economy is causing.
Right.
How can we get everyone participating in the economic future? That's why when I got elected, I took a trip actually to Appalachia, Paintsville, Kentucky, which was helping coal miners' kids get jobs as app developers, learning Apple or Google software, apprenticeship programs. So what are we going to do? I believe we need a strong, bold economic message. That means Medicare for all. It means free public college, because now going to public college should be accessible without student loans. It means apprenticeship programs. For the life of me, I don't understand how a president who made his whole reputation on The Apprentice isn't for funding millions of apprenticeships across this country, right? Like Switzerland does that, Germany does that. It means expanding college towns. We know college towns create jobs. Well, why we just have Ann Arbor University of Michigan and 5 satellite campuses that may not be as good? How do we beef it up so that you have strong college university towns across this country? Why are all the federal jobs in the DC? We can move some of these jobs to the states. How do we invest in giving people the skills for the 21st century? And finally, Sherrod Brown and I have this radical proposal to have $1 trillion expansion of the earned income tax credit. In the past, people have talked about $50 billion. This is about 20 times that. And what it'll do is an alternative to Trump's tax cut. Trump is saying, I want to give $7 trillion of tax cuts to investors in Wall Street and people in the stock market. We're saying, why don't we give a wage supplement to people who are working hard? If you're a nurse, if you're a firefighter, your hours are being cut, your wages are stagnating. Our plan would give $5,000 to $10,000 back to those families so they could make ends meet.
Wow. I think all of those are really strong and appealing. What's the sense in your caucus for getting behind some of the things that you laid out?
Well, it's been mixed. I mean, I think that there's the sense, well, everyone should run on the platform that suits their district. But I don't think that's the aspirational politics that's going to get us where we need to go. We just saw Corbyn run and do so well with a clear vision. We saw Bernie Sanders talking about not just incremental politics, but aspirational politics. Our party should stand for aspirational populism. What are the big policies that are going to move and help people's lives, working class, middle class families? I haven't seen that yet.
I want to pivot, and our time is short. I wish it was, and I could talk to you forever. Is that you are a lecturer in economics at Stanford, if I memory serves?
Until I got elected.
And I went to the Lynn School of Economics and have a degree in economics.
I
one of the things that gets knocked on the side is neoliberalism. And I want to understand what you think about where we are on that. I have to say that for me, when I was taught neoliberalism, there were 2 aspects of it that were supposed to go together: free markets and democracy for all. And that if you had those 2 things together, that they would be the check on state power, on corporate power, even if you had a strong democracy. But what we got was liberalized markets, crony capitalism, and less democracy. So I wonder if in a pure economics, we're not talking about the way in which this concept has been popularized, which we agree with the criticism of it. But from a pure economic standpoint, do you believe that we had liberalism play out as we were taught it or understood it, or that concept actually never really was implemented? We got part of it, not all of it.
I think that's a great critique. There are several things that were presupposed in neoliberalism. One was multiple entrants, right, in competition.
That's right. That's
now
right.
we've had concentrated economic power. That
That's
was
right.
never there. It was also presupposed that the rules of the economy, people write those rules.
That's right.
And how do we choose who those rules benefit? Well, when we move towards things like liberalizing stock buybacks, Reagan's rule in 1982, where he said companies can now engage in buying back their own stock instead of investing in jobs and growth. Those were decisions we made when we made a decision to repeal Glass-Steagall that allows investment banks to speculate. We made decisions that made the markets work for the wealthy,
That's right.
for the investor class, instead of for ordinary individuals. So
That's right.
what progressives are saying is not let's just get rid of markets, it's saying let's get markets to work for working families, for individuals, for the middle class, and not for the wealthy and the connected. The other thing neoliberalism got wrong is the sense that somehow we could go promote democracy around the world and that we were going to intervene. And I think we made a lot of foreign policy mistakes in Iraq, escalating in Afghanistan, calling for regime change in Libya and Syria, interfering in Yemen, because ultimately we have to have a principle of first doing no harm, recognizing our own role in the overthrow of Mossadegh in Iran, and recognizing that movements have to be organic, they can't come from imposition by the United States. And so I think neoliberalism was a little short-sighted on foreign policy, and it was short-sighted about market economic concentration.
How do you explain Chicago to non-Chicagoans and put it in a national context?
Well, I would say that, and it's just not Chicago, because a lot of these problems are going on around the country. But they
Chicago gets,
They target Chicago because we, break record numbers in violence. But really what it is we got record numbers in poverty. We got record numbers in the unemployment rate. In Chicago, we have the highest unemployment rate amongst black youth than around the country. And so when you're talking about violence, you got to talk about the economics. And that's what I'm trying to get people to understand. It's not more police. It's not martial law. It's not gun control. You can't go and take away guns that are illegal. Where you going to find them? And so it's about
guns are coming from outside Chicago, right? Yes. Because Chicago has some of the strongest gun control laws in the country.
We have some of the stuff that's not going to stop crime. You got to talk about education and how the school systems are underfunded. You got 40 kids a classroom. They cut funding in which they're not able to hire clinical staff, and so a lot of them are walking around with mental health issues. Here in Chicago, our mayor Rahm Emanuel shut down every mental health clinic in the black community, so there are no mental health facilities. In some of the worst areas, the unemployment rates can get as high as 91%. And so a lot of people are not working. There are no community centers. The businesses are boarded up because the banks are redlining people in which they're not giving out loans. So when you want to talk about violence, you got to look at the whole community and what's going on, the roots of the problem. And all they do is have an oppressive force be ready to arrest or kill anybody that get out of line for basically being in survival mode.